Hey there, today I'm going to be testing the Intel Arc A380 with the latest Intel drivers in BeamNG Drive. I am pairing the Intel Arc A380 with the Intel i5-13400F CPU with 32GB of DDR4 RAM at 3200MHz, and the boot drive and the game drive are both on SSDs. Starting off, I am testing 1080p on the very low settings in West Coast USA, and doing that the game is getting 93 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 73. Overall, the game is running absolutely amazingly. Outside of the main town, the game's getting 100 plus FPS, but inside the city it's getting in the 90s. But yeah, one way or another, it's absolutely perfectly playable, and I think it's about time to turn the settings up. Turning the settings from very low to the low settings about halved the frame rate. Instead of getting 100 plus sometimes, now the frame rate's hovering around 60 on average. When I'm in the town/city, it's getting right around 55, 54 FPS. When I start going through some forests, the frame rate drops all the way down into the mid-40s. It's still absolutely playable, it's just a big drop from very low. 1080p on the normal settings, and I also turned off quite a few different things that I don't prefer with the normal settings. I turned off ambient occlusion, I turned off motion blur, I turned off light rays, blooms, depth of field, and I turned off dynamic reflections for the mirrors or something along that line as well. I will have those settings turned off for the normal, Steamdeck, and high settings, but I will use them on the ultra settings. The game was running very similarly to the low settings. It was getting around 55 FPS on average with a 1% low of 40, and when I was going through the forest it was getting about 45 frames per second. Either way, on the low settings, BeamNG Drive is perfectly playable. Then I tried 1080p on the Steamdeck settings, and the game was getting 53 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 40. And the Steamdeck settings seem to be a little bit more intensive than the low settings and the normal settings. The reason why is because in the forest area, the frame rate did actually drop into the upper 30s for a small amount of time. It got to around 39. Either way, it's still perfectly playable on the Steamdeck settings, and yes, I disabled what I disabled on the normal settings on the Steamdeck settings too. Then I tried 1080p on the high settings, of course with those things disabled that I said I would disable, and the game was getting around 45 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 32. The game is running absolutely fine even now. It is a little bit more intensive. It doesn't look all that much better either. But either way, it still is running quite decent. In the forest, it did drop into the low 30s at times for the frame rate, but that's not that bad, to be fair. It's a really intensive map anyway. By the way, the reason why I disabled those settings that I disabled is because I just really don't like the look of it. It either makes the game look like I don't have my glasses on, or it makes the game look like, well, I don't have my glasses on. So I just want the game to look clear, so I disabled the blurry settings. Then I tried the ultra settings, and the game was running significantly worse. It was getting 26 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 20. That is almost a slideshow. Is it still playable? Yes, but it's just, I can't really recommend the ultra settings. And I of course had every single setting turned on because it is ultra settings. This is the most intensive this game can get, reasonably at least. And going through the forest area, the frame rate did drop into the low 20s, almost into the teens at times, but one way or another, is it playable? Kind of. That's about all I can say about it. And I don't know why, but the ultra settings to me just doesn't look that good. It looks blurry, and it just doesn't look right to me. I don't know why. So instead, let's test out my custom high settings. When I say my custom high settings, I don't mean I made the settings up. I just mean I went through the settings, I set them to ultra, and then I slowly turned stuff down one at a time to see what actually impacts the looks of the game all that much. So I turned off anti-aliasing because that makes it blurry. I disabled motion blur. I left the textures set to high. I left the mesh set to normal. The mesh is stuff like guardrails and stuff. If you have that all the way down, they might just randomly pop up out of nowhere and you crash into them. So I rather have those higher. I have the textures high because I like to look at the trees. If you have the texture set too low, it will just look like a big blob. But if you have it set too high, it actually looks decent. and I just set it to what you saw when I showed you the settings. And of course you could turn the shader quality down as well if you wanted to get even better frame rate. But I think this is a good medium for this graphics card. It's getting about 56 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 42. The game looks absolutely amazing like this, at least to me, and overall it's perfectly playable. Either way, if this video was helpful or informative or entertaining to you, if you could leave a like, that would be amazing. If you're new to the channel and want to see more of these videos, consider subscribing. And if you want to help support the channel, consider becoming a channel member. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.